Welcome back to another episode of Toriko Unveiled. Continuing off the last video, I hope you all left some room after your Thanksgiving feast because today we're gonna sink our teeth back into the endless brokenness that is Toriko. Now, one common trope in anime and literally most villain v protagonist plotlines is the villain seeking immortality. This may be showcased best in Dragon Ball Z with Frieza on the Namek Saga, then later Zamasu, and also in Naruto with the Lord of Creeps Orochimaru, Father in Van Hohenheim in Full Metal Alchemist, Sosuke Aizen, Kaguya. There are plenty of references to godlike or immortal beings in anime. To gain immortality is seemingly to gain omnipotence. Characters doggedly pursue this ability as if it would seemingly render them unstoppable, despite there being severe drawbacks to this ability that I'll go into detail about. In most cases of immortality, I've noticed it works more like super regeneration or invulnerability. Being immortal by no means translates to being undefeatable. Orochimaru has to switch bodies every few decades to keep himself in tip-top shape. Being immortal in Dragon Ball Z just honestly doesn't matter because Zamasu died. In Father in Van Hohenheim's case, the later was cursed to watch his people he loved died, making his immortality more so a curse, and even for Father a burden, and even for Sosuke Aizen, wait, never mind, Aizen kinda got away with it. Anyway, and that's why today, I introduce to you the man who can kill immortals and the immortal in question, starting with Brunch the Tengu. Brunch is a rather abrasive personality, and holds the number 3 slot for the world's best chef. We get introduced to Brunch during the cooking festival arc, where among the participants, Brunch actually was comparable in strength to fighters like the 4 Kings and branch heads of the Gourmet Corps. Brunch even participated in the World Festival at one point and destroyed the competition by a clear margin, earning himself the title of Festival Champion. While well-renowned and skilled, Brunch is actually comparable to Zebra in the fact that he is a problem child. He possesses a rude attitude that often comes off as disrespect, like when he woke up late for the festival, shook the entire arena with the force of his voice, and proceeded to start literal beef with the 4 Heavenly Kings. Brunch displays his incredible speed here, moving from the stadium to the coastline within moments, and through various shenanigans, he upsets the tournament before the Gourmet Corps launches a massive assault on the festival to kidnap the chefs for their sinister cooking. This show does get kind of weird. But here we get introduced to branch number 1 culinary head chef, Elg, also known as Ever Young Elg, the oldest of the chefs in the Gourmet Corps, and that kind of means little compared to the fact that Starjan or Midoriya are 300 years old, but to understand the depth of this battle between Elg and Brunch, we gotta dive into their backstories. Brunch is a Tengu from the Gourmet World village, known as Bizarre Food World or Hex Food World, depending on whichever anime or manga you're looking at. This fun fact actually makes Brunch, as a child of Bizarre Food World, a descendant of ancient humans who were once slaves to the Nitro that underwent forced mutations. These mutations led to Brunch's truly devastating ability, and that's fully amped electrical control. Brunch is quite literally a walking power plant, similar to Static Shock, Electro, or Cole McGrath. It's revealed that much like an electric catfish or eel, Brunch possesses bodily organs that allow him to produce electricity. The difference here being that both the catfish and eel produce under 1000 volts at 350 and 800 roughly. Now, Brunch's attacks average at 100 million volts with over 100,000 amps, this making Brunch's attacks comparable to a literal bolt of fucking lightning. Every cell in Brunch's body acts like an electric organ, making him a living conduit, like I said, similar to Cole McGrath of the Infamous franchise. Though Brunch does need an initial jumpstart to cycle his electricity in his body, and he uses batteries for that, he can magnetize and electrify other objects down to the cellular level as well. Brunch states his attacks take 0.1 seconds to connect. If a flash of light lasting approximately 0.1 seconds reaches your eye in that time, it traveled about 1900 miles to get there. It will take another 0.1 seconds for it to register on your brain, your eyes will begin to blink, in another 0.1 seconds you will know it, meaning being hit by Brunch's attacks would be like not even perceiving the light from a flash. Now this is where things get interesting. Brunch launches these attacks at Elg, attacks so powerful they destroy things at a cellular level, and Elg took several of these bolts before we even got to get introduced to him. Ever Young Elg is what I assume the oldest standards member of the Gourmet Corps lower chefs. While Elg might appear to be a centaur, his lower body is actually one of the offspring of the 8 kings, the Horse King Heracles. This enabling Elg to have the ability of never aging, but it doesn't really just end there. The Horse King Heracles is perhaps a god-class being that is more of a force of nature than an animal, and its offspring, though significantly weaker, are stronger than any beast from the human world and many in the Gourmet. During their battle, Brunch electrically dissects Elg with his lightning sword, stated that there are no such thing as immortality, just special cells that regenerate. Elg proved this statement false by not only regenerating, but regenerating into dozens of clones of himself, and Brunch compares this to the real-life gene known as the Now-Darake gene that allows self-replication in species of real-life flathead worms. This is a great example of how fucking smart Brunch actually is, as he doesn't simply win this battle against immortality by force, but cunning. He then tells Elg that his attacks and top speeds, while not light speed, clock in at 10,000 kilometers a second, or Mach 30,000. So Brunch's top speed this arc is around 23 million miles per hour. He goes on to state that his perception is of equal level and deduces that this is why he was able to be cut initially by Elg. Elg goes on to reveal that his immortal cells are capable of rapid adaptation and slowly develops a higher resistance to electricity, taking blow after blow from Brunch, eventually depleting Brunch's energy reserves and laying down a barrage of blows and mocking the Tengu, stating his electricity is now useless. And that is when Brunch reveals exactly why he's a walking power plant. Brunch can actually convert various forms of external energy, wind, hydraulics, fire, or even solar power. All energy essentially in Brunch's body is fuel, a literal walking power plant like I said, and this extends to kinetic energy as well. Using the energy he received from being beat by Elg and his copies, Brunch powers up and unleashes a final electric burst that overwhelms even the newly adapted Elg's resistance. And this extends to a further checkmate, as Brunch purposely cut Elg to make him bleed and then electrified him using the blood as a conductor. This rendered the immortal Elg basically an ever-regenerating power conduit, left to a state of constant death by electrocution, until eventually Elg's immortal cells simply realized that this is life and gave up and stopped regenerating, thus ending the battle and revealing Elg's true form, a rather odd-looking creature that had always hid its face. Elg shamed by this, but Brunch sends him off with a warm last few words, that where he is from, Elg would be considered good-looking, handsome even, which upon Elg digests those words as his immortal cells fully give out. Though immortality is a vastly sought-after power in the mind and bodies, bound by mortal constraints, it's more of a burden. As Elg described it, the longer you live, the less stimulus one receives from existence, making life and experience dull and mundane. This also is often a showcase of many immortals. Simply put, living for an eternity or even not simply dying can become a prison in and of itself. And Brunch goes on to actually be a key player in the final arcs of Toriko and receives the typical late game power-ups, but that's another story, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Unveiled.